So welcome everyone to today's conversation, something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. We are joined here by Mr. Erik Solheim, who is a Norwegian diplomat, a former politician who has played a significant role in international peace efforts, environmental leadership, and global development. He served as Norway's Minister of the Environment and International Development, was Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, and chaired the OECD's Development Assistance Committee. For many people, particularly in relation to those from Sri Lanka, he's also known for his role in facilitating the peace process in the early 2000s. So today's discussion will center predominantly around Sri Lanka, why the peace talks emerged when they did, how they developed, what was possible at that time, and where things ultimately fell apart. Okay, so we're also going to look at what negotiation really requires in deeply divided societies, and how, if it is possible, to create or allow for genuine reconciliation in practical terms, right? And also in terms of what's going on in Sri Lanka right now and how it stands. So the purpose has been explained, right? For those who are listening, it's really important for this discussion to be allowing you to think for yourselves, for you to develop your own critical thinking and use the information in the way that's most useful for you. Okay, no one's going to try and give you guys any answers, but this is just going to be somewhere where we're going to listen to Mr. Erik Solheim's perspective. So, with that being said, Erik, I would like to start with the peace talks themselves, right? In terms of how or why did the peace talks emerge? Okay, what conditions made them possible, right? Because these are two distrustful sides who agreed to listen and to, consider your points. Okay, so how did the negotiations develop? At the time, what did each side need or believe they needed? Okay, at the time, and in terms of your own hindsight, what do you think would have actually helped it to have some kind of lasting peace at the time?
Look, the violent conflict in Sri Lanka developed from mid-1970 onwards. There were, of course, horrible episodes before that, but really any kind of war developed from the 1970s onwards. And gradually the Tamil Tigers, the LTT, established itself as the dominant force on the Tamil side, but of course the government was always the dominant force on the other side. After a lot of back and forth, which we can come back to, I think both sides realized that they couldn't win an all-out victory. So, and if you cannot win, well, you need to find some kind of compromise. So there was different efforts to bring in a third party. I mean, then President Chandrika Kumaratunga suggested France should be the mediator. Tamil Tigers rejected that because they said that she studied in France and she understands French very well, so maybe France will be not neutral. And over some time, they developed the idea that Norway could be the potential negotiator. So we came into the picture in 1998. That time it was completely secret. In Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka, only two persons, the president and the foreign minister, was aware. And on the Tamil Tiger side also, just the absolute leadership was aware. But from year 2000 onwards, it was all in the open. And we were accepted as the neutral third party. We were asked by the government as well as by the Tamil Tigers to take on that role. But if I may add one element, which is very interesting for the future development, because we started the peace talks when the Tamil Tigers, the LTT, was at the peak of the powers. Sometimes you hear people are opposed to the Tigers who said they were forced into the talks. No, not at all. The Tamil Tigers were never as powerful as in 2000, 2001. that overrun some of the main military bases of the government and so-called Elephant Pass that had been very close to wiping out the government forces from the entire Jaffna Peninsula. That destroyed the economy of Sri Lanka by attacking the airport in Colombo. So the Tamil Tigers was very, very strong, but that was exactly the time when they reached out for peace. So there were two strong forces. The government always, of course, the military side the strongest, but the Tamil Tigers, very, very strong military force at that time.
Okay, so they were very strong at the time, but so from my own understanding and in terms of what the narrative is in terms of the diaspora, the peace negotiations essentially failed because we just didn't trust each other, right? So from the Tamil side, they didn't trust what the Sinhalese were proposing. From the Sinhala side, they also felt that this wasn't really going anywhere. This was actually buying time for the Tigers to get stronger, to go forward, vice versa, right? It was actually literally the same argument seen from both sides. So at the time, what do you think would have really helped both sides? So from, let's say, from the Tamil Tigers side, what were they missing in terms of the peace talks?
First of all, this kind of distrust, I believe you will find in basically every really hard fought conflict. I mean, there's no trust between, say, Russia and Ukraine these days, or between the Palestinians and the Israelis, or between the warring factions in Sudan. So that comes as a result of war. There was no, you're right, there was absolutely no trust. The government, or at least many people on the government side, thought that the Tamil Tigers were just there to stabilize the situation and for a protracted peace process, and then they will go for war again. And on the Tamil Tiger side, they thought that they could never really negotiate with Colombo because they wouldn't get anything. So distrust was all over the place. I think one reason why it failed was that there were two very different concepts of the peace process. The government wanted to go straight to the so-called core issues, which was how to create a federal or whatever system in Sri Lanka, while the Tamil Tigers wanted to establish trust first and then better livelihood for the Tamils in the northeast, and then gradually go for settling the core issues. And if you take the kind of bird views of the peace process, there were two main constraints, which were there from the very beginning. On the government side, there were two main parties, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the United National Party. Later, they had the prime minister was from one party and the president from the other. These two parties spent sometimes more energy fighting each other than opposing the Tigers. Whatever was proposed, if one party proposed it, the other would say no, thank you. And was very, very hard to get a consistent position from Colombo, which the Tigers could then relate to. I sometimes had the feeling that some of the leaders in Colombo hated each other more than they hated Mr. Prabhakaran, the head of the Tamil Tigers. On the Tiger side, I think the main problem was that this was not a council, it was not a democratic institution. It was basically dominated by the personality of one man, Mr. Prabhakaran. He had founded the organization, had built it up. He was much older than most of the key generals and leaders. So he was the overriding force and made, at the end of the day, any decision. He did, however, have one person which was very important, Anton Balasingham, his main advisor. And Balasingham was the only person older than Prabhakaran, which matters in a Sri Lankan context. And Balasingham had an enormous knowledge of the entire world. He understood India, understood the United States, had been living abroad. So he brought the right advice to Mr. Prabhakaran. At the end of the day, if Prabhakaran had followed the advice of Balasingham, everything would have taken a different turn. Probably there would have been some negotiated settlement. But Prabhakaran struggled to agree to any real compromise because he had a militarized mind where very easily, if he didn't like something, he would kill off that person. I mean, if someone opposed him, he would rather kill that person rather than finding a way to compromise or find a settlement. So the militarized mind of Prabhakaran and the deep divide in Colombo were the two main obstacles to a negotiated peace.
Mm. And that's about 22, 23 years ago.
That's
So
right.
things have, I mean, right now there is no Tamil Tigers, but the ongoing issues are still there in silos, we could say, possibly. But going forward, so this is more towards the Tamil diaspora in terms of the youth, because we have a lot of youth who are very well interested in international relations and diplomacy, also in terms of politics and international law. So we've already established that these were two very distrustful sides, right? In terms of your role within this negotiation and in terms of advising the youth going forward, how would you say would be the best or the most genuine, realistic approach you could take to go into these types of discussions? How do you stay centered when possibly you feel a certain type of way towards one side as opposed to the other side? Okay, how do you keep yourself centered in the end goal, which is to try to attempt to get to some kind of middle ground? Okay. Also, what matters most in negotiation? Would you say it is, like you said, we have Ukraine, Russia, we have Israel and Palestine, we have ongoing conflicts around the world. Trust is something that we can poetically speak about. Realistically, it's not that easy for us to establish. So, how would we use timing, leverage, and to be realistic in explaining to people what is available to them?
Yeah, this is a wide array of questions, of course. Uh, There is no easy way to trust. Trust can only be established on the basis that you agree to something and you see it delivered. That's gradually building up trust. The peace process in Sri Lanka was very successful for some time. In 2002, 2003, there was no killings. Tamil Tigers stopped any killing. The government stopped any killing. And it was seen by the world as very successful. Gradually, it crept back to war. And in 2009, of course, for those who are not following Sri Lankan event, it ended up in a total disaster and destruction of the Tamil Tigers and an all-out victory for the government, but also in the killing of probably tens of thousands of Tamil civilians. So it was an absolute horrible bloodshed, but with the government as the winning force. I believe that it could have ended differently. It could have ended in a federal settlement in Sri Lanka, which could have been agreeable to both parties, which would have meant a lot of self-rule for the North and East, but within one Sri Lanka. That was the one and only possible compromise, because a centralized state could never be acceptable to the Tigers. Complete separation or two states could never be acceptable to the government. So that would have been the only compromise. We can discuss why it didn't happen, but we now know it didn't happen. On the side of Norway, we of course tried to be absolutely neutral in every case, but we had a structural problem, which was that we were basically the only organization relating to the Tigers. Every government in the world, of course, had an embassy in Colombo, they related to the Sri Lankan government, but only we related to the Tamil Tigers. So whenever people saw, for instance, Prakran, the leader of the Tamil Tiger, on TV, they would normally see him with me or with some other Norwegian diplomat. So that created the perspective in Sri Lanka that we were much closer to the Tamil Tigers than to the government, and we were up to any number of accusations that we were biased. These were unfair, but we became kind of we came up for enormous criticism from Sinhalese chauvinist or Sinhalese hardliners. But I think that's what a peacemaker will have to accept, that there is no way you can assist peace in any conflict without being attacked. If you want to be, if you cannot sustain criticism, please take another job than trying to create peace.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Just need to grow some thick skin and deal with it.
No, absolutely. What I mean, what I try to always keep in mind that when I met with people, sometimes the leaders were lying to me. I mean, I knew they were
Mm,
lying. They knew that I knew they were lying, but still they kept this facade. I try to keep in mind, what do the victims of this war want me to do? And for
mm,
sure, I knew that the victims, whether these victims were Tamil civilians or, for that matter, people in the south who were under the fear of terrorist attack, or at least whatever they consider a terrorist attack, keep in mind what's on their agenda. What do they want?
mm,
And I was always knowing they wanted peace.
mm,
It's not, I mean, Tamils and Sinhalese have lived together for hundreds, probably thousands of years in Sri Lanka. They have normally not been at war. War
mm,
was created by political forces going back to the 1950s. But it's not that it's a natural thing for Tamils and Sinhalese not to work together. They can work together. Tamils tend to be Hindu. Sinhalese are normally Buddhist. But Buddhists and Hindus work very well together in India without any problem. Languages are completely separate. I mean, English is more related to Sinhalese and Tamil is to Sinhalese. But there is no reason why you cannot work together even if you have different languages. When it comes to, say, food, outlook, philosophy, a lot of similarities between Tamils and
100%.
Sinhalese, so obviously they can work together.
100%. Like you said, Eric, for thousands of years, we lived together, right?
Yeah.
In the last 50, well, 75 years, things have changed drastically. Okay.
For
And
those who don't really know Sri Lanka history, I think the big mistake which forced this came in the 1950s. Look,
mm,
Sri Lanka became independent from the UK basically because of the struggle in India and other places. India had a strong independence movement led by people like Mahatma Gandhi. Sri Lanka didn't really have that. But
mm,
when India and Myanmar and others fought for their independence, Sri Lanka also became independent. And then very elite politicians wanted to connect to the masses in Sri Lanka. The most famous is Mr. Bandaranaike, who was the prime minister. His wife and later daughter became leaders in Sri Lanka. But he put up a policy which was very popular with the farmers, the working class in the south, which was Sinhala first
mm,
and Buddhism first, prioritizing Sinhalese language and Buddhist religion. Well, that was of course very popular with the Sinhalese, but if you're Tamil, you don't want Sinhalese to be the one on the language in Sri Lanka, and if you're a Hindu, you don't want Buddhism to be the preferred religion.
mm,
So while it was popular, it was also very dividing. And that policy created a divided Sri Lanka. If India had done something similar to that, if, say, Prime Minister Modi said India is a place only for those who speak Hindi language and not for Tamils or people
mm,
speaking Telugu or Malayalam or Kannada or any other language, well, India will also go into war.
for
So this
sure.
was, while there was no intention on the side of Mr. Bandaranaike for war, it created the conditions, and then step by step, conflict took root and became more and more violent until a point where it was crazily violent, horribly violent.
Of course. And I think it's really important to hear this from you because this is something that is spoken on by some individuals within the Tamil diaspora, but they are quickly shut down as being agents of a certain government or they are traitors or whatever it is. And unfortunately, the youth, right, who have been grown up predominantly using the internet, get very one-sided information. And they are also fed information that this Sinhala Tamil issues have been long-standing, which has been going back thousands of years. Okay, because they don't have the right sources to show them what's actually going on.
Look, some crazy extremists started discussing, did the Tamils or the Sinhalese come first to Sri Lanka? Number one, then we are at the time of Buddha, maybe earlier, 3,000 years ago. But let's assume that the archaeologists were able to establish with precision that
Mm,
say the Tamils came first or the Sinhalese came first.
mm.
What does it mean?
Doesn't make a
You have the
difference.
right to kick out the other community because you came first. Well, then every white, yellow, or black person will have to be kicked out of the United States of America because only the indigenous have the right to the land.
100%.
Every person over black skin or white skin are newcomers to America, but still we consider them to have the right to become the president of the United
Exactly.
States. So we cannot base modern relations on claims like, say, our community came first. That's nationalism really going wrong.
100%. It creates chaos, creates confusion, right? And I really don't want these types of conversations to keep going on in the future. I just feel like it, for me, in terms of my understanding within the Tamil diaspora, we just keep going around in circles, right? Something happens and we feel a certain way about it. We may not agree about it. And then we take a very fight or flight response. We're not really thinking about what this is going to mean for the future or for the people on the land. So, Erik, you've recently been to Sri Lanka, right? And I closely follow your posts on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and I've seen that you've traveled around and you've spoken about the development in Sri Lanka. Okay, also in terms of the clean energy and in terms of the environmental side of things that's going on in Sri Lanka, tourism is another area. From what you've seen, okay, in terms of what's going on right now, what gives you hope for there to be a genuine, how do I say, working together of the Tamil and Sinhala people on the island?
I think it takes time because the experience of the war was so horrible, particularly on the Tamil side, where so many
Mm,
people lost the loved ones. And if you are a elderly person who lost your son or daughter in the war, even in massacres, of course it's not easy to forgive.
mm,
However, the only way future is to work together. Now the back in the days, the Tamil dominated areas in Sri Lanka were the most prosperous, most educated. Tamil was, Jaffna was kind of the global center for Tamil culture. With so many Tamils going to the diaspora and with the wars, Jaffna is now probably less developed than most other cities in Sri
mm,
Lanka. So I would suggest that the way forward is to focus very strongly on economic and social uplifting of the Tamil areas. That can only come with investment, and the Tamil diaspora can play a key role in that. And together with that, to work on systems for self-governance for Tamils. Tamil and Sinhala language are completely separate. You
mm,
cannot you cannot ask a Tamil person to go to the police station and speak to a Sinhala policeman in Sinhalese. Cannot work because
mm,
Tamil must be the dominant language, and Tamil culture must dominate in the north. There is a lot of concern that Buddhist groups are setting up Buddhist temples in the north and diluting Tamil culture. All these need to be addressed, and then you need a stronger self-governed Northeast, but with a focus on economic and social development.
mm. So I think definitely we need to get a little bit more of a conversation going with the political side of things in Sri Lanka. I mean, in terms of the way that empowerment is being used in terms of empowering women in Sri Lanka, how effective do you think it's going? Do you think it's superficial, or do you think it's actually developmental and it's actually going to have some kind of profitable fruits for the future?
Look, even if the Tamil Tigers was a very violent and too militarized organization, it also had a number of very positive impacts on Tamil culture and tradition. For example, most of the leaders were low caste people in a traditionally
Mm,
very caste-oriented society. Still, I met Tamils in Norway who didn't want to speak to Tamils of another caste, even if they lived in Norway for quite some time. It was absolutely ridiculous. But Prabhakran and most of the other leaders came from a very, from a modest or even a local, poor background. And they also employed women in the armed forces and in many other ways. So they also disrupted the culture in the positive way of giving room for women and for low-caste people. That is something to build upon in the future. And of course, in the Tamil diaspora, when the girls are as successful as boys, probably more successful, I tend to believe that there is hardly any group in the entire world which is so educated as Tamil youth in the United Kingdom or Canada or Norway. They are all doctors or dentists or lawyers or professors or whatever. They make tons of money. In my nation,
100%.
Norway, the Tamil youth do much, much better than Norwegian youth in Norwegian
Mm,
universities. But that's, of course, an enormous resource for Sri Lanka and for the Tamil areas of Sri Lanka to get these people to invest, maybe go back and live there for some time, and even if not
mm,
moving permanently, they can help universities and education, and can help as doctors or dentists, whatever, mobilize these resources for Sri Lanka. Some of this is happening, but a lot more could happen. And the government, of course, also must make sure this can happen in a good way. Otherwise, people will not come from Europe or America, from the Tamil communities there. If they cannot invest and feel certain that it works, if they can't feel secure, it will never happen.
100%. Like you said, Eric, I mean, the diaspora is very well educated. They're in positions of power and positions of influence. However, even though we're not, I wasn't born in Sri Lanka. I was born in France. I grew up in London, but I still have felt and faced the same mentalities, even from younger generations, from my nationality, from my people, from the Tamil people. So it's definitely a shout for us to work together, right? And that's why I really wanted to not mention any groups, and I didn't want to mention any specific events either, because unfortunately, my people are very quick to react and don't really want to listen to what's being actually spoken. And they're very quick to attack each other rather than try to understand where we've gone wrong and try to guide each other. So, for those who are listening, right, wherever you may be from, okay, if you are from the island, pretty much everything that Eric's saying is that we need to actually start talking between ourselves, okay, and really saying what it is we want. So, Eric, there is one question I wanted to ask you, right? Because 20 years ago, one of the main reasons that, not 20 years ago, 50 years ago, when these conflicts all started to erupt, the main issue was that the Tamil people weren't able to think for themselves, right? They weren't able to, the right to self-determine. Okay, so I recently went to Sri Lanka and I spoke to a few NGOs, civil societies, and I asked them specifically, what is it that they'd like? Okay, going forward, what do they want? And not a single group knew exactly what they wanted. Right? They didn't really have a vision for what it meant to be able to determine for themselves a life. So this is quite a broad question, I know, but I'm just asking you. So from your side, what can the Tamil diaspora realistically do, right, in terms of coming together to set up a future vision for the Tamil people on the island?
I can give a few indications. Number one, I think the Tamil diaspora need to accept that the leadership must come from Sri Lanka. The leadership
Mm,
cannot come from the diaspora. I mean, political, because I mean, the people are living their lives in Sri Lanka, the Tamils in Jaffna, but also many Tamils in Colombo and many other parts of Sri Lanka. They must be the leaders, and the Tamil diaspora must accept that they have a very important role, but they are not the masters of Sri Lanka. And secondly, Tamil unity, I believe, is very essential. I know that I cannot just tell Tamils to
mm,
unite, and no one can do that. But unless there is unity, and as long as Tamils, both in the diaspora and in Sri Lanka, spend so much time fighting each other, they are in a much weaker position to make the demand. So my very humble suggestion is that Tamils in Sri Lanka, as well as the Tamil diaspora, should try to form a minimum platform. And will never agree on everything,
mm,
but agree on a minimum platform for uh, Tamil sovereignty in the north and east, whether it's based on the so-called 13th Amendment or whatever, but a minimum platform for Tamil self-rule in the Northeast, and a minimum platform for economic and social and environment development of the Tamil-dominated areas, which are, of course, particularly the north, but also parts of the eastern Sri Lanka. Unless there is more unity, it's very, very hard to impress upon the Colombo to follow.
100%. Because if there isn't a common voice, right, why would someone even want to listen to the Tamil representatives if every single person is asking for something different?
Yeah.
So, Erik, at this point, I'm going to bring an end to the discussion on Sri Lanka, but I would like to ask you some questions in terms of leadership, in terms of your role as, both being a diplomat, but you are someone who's celebrated around the world, right? You are someone who's spoken about because you have a genuine interest in each other's causes, right? Even through your posts, you can see that you are genuinely interested in exactly what's going on around the world. I personally wanted to ask you a question, which is about how do you handle your emotions, right? Let's say you go somewhere, you travel, let's say to China, and then the next day you're in India, okay? And then you're in Bangladesh, and then you're in Europe. How are you able to keep centered, right? How are you able to keep on top of things, basically, is what I'm asking you.
Yeah. If there is a answer to that question, is to always try to be able to focus on the people you are with at any given point. I mean, this is also about some people have enormous difficulties with managing the time. They are claiming that they have jet lags wherever they come. Well, I tend to, when I'm China, I'm on Chinese time. When I'm India, I'm on Indian time. If I go to the United States of America, I'm on American time, and I focus on the people who are there. You should always, when you are in a conversation with someone, please focus on those people, not on your phone or something else. Because if you're accepted to meet someone, they deserve your attention. I'm
100%.
absolutely not claiming that I'm perfect in this, but I think that is the most important. Focus on the people you are with and focus on their concerns. You may not agree with them, but basically every person you meet have a story to tell you, some information to provide. You can learn someone. Even from the people you disagree with, you can learn something.
100%. So the key lesson is to keep attention, be present, and to keep your eye on the goal, which is there to serve the people, to understand. Yeah, I think that's going to be really important. Main reason I say this is because with AI growing, right, people aren't really speaking to each other anymore. They just quickly go onto AI and ask, how do I do this? How do I speak to this person? How do I deal with someone from a different country? And something I have experienced is that people are really quick to put me into a category. For example, I'm currently studying a master's, I work as a lecturer. So if I tell someone I work as a lecturer, straight away, the respect I get is a much higher amount when opposed to when I say I'm a master's student. Okay, people just look at me, okay, so what are you going to do about it, right? If I say I'm a master's student from a certain institution, straight away people think I'm international and I don't know nothing about what's going on in the UK, even though I pretty much grew up here. So it's really important to keep a genuine interest in the individuals that you're speaking with and to understand that you're here to help them. So Erik, with that, I think we can bring it to an end. I want to thank you so much for you taking so much time to listen to my very broad, abstract questions and giving answers. I'm very grateful. And for the youth and for the people who are going to watch this recording, I hope they understand that the key takeaway for me anyway is to be human, right? Is to understand that there is no perfect way. Fair enough, we can come up with frameworks, we can come up with a set structure, but also you need to give a little bit of flexibility to see how you can reach the end goal, which, as Erik beautifully said, is peace, right? Which is the most fundamental aspect of things. If we can reach peace, afterwards we can figure out the details. So thank you, Erik. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for great questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you soon. Okay. Thank you.